get Abraham's attention. You ready to roll? I will now call this meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the April 25th, 2019 City of Hollister Planning Commission meeting. May I have the verification of agenda posting, please?
You may. The agenda was posted on April 22nd of 2019 at 8:50 a.m.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioner Johnson, will you lead us into the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Karen. Roll call, please.
Sure. Chairperson Huboy.
Here.
Commissioner Stevens.
Here.
Commissioner Munzer.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Henderson.
Here.
I will ask for approval of minutes dated April 11th, 2019. I have a chance to review the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. The minutes are approved. Communications from the public on items not listed on the agenda. Any speaker cards, Abraham or Brian?
Nothing.
Okay. Then we move into public hearings. Item number 1, RV and Boats Ordinance, City of Hollister. The City of Hollister Planning Commission shall determine whether to recommend to the City Council amendments to Section 10.10.030, quote, private property, parking and storage of recreational vehicles prohibited, unquote, of the Hollister Municipal Code, CEQA categorical exemption. Abraham or Amber?
Thank you. So this is just a quick review of some of the amendments that were made last time. So as you can see, for all RV and boats, they're going to need to be operational and good repair. They must be currently registered to residents of the property. They may not encroach into the public right-of-way, and they must be on an approved driveway or parking space. In the front yard, there's only going to be allowance for one recreational vehicle, so an RV or a boat. The parentheses where it says B1, I apologize, in the draft resolution, it said front side yard. We corrected it, so it just says front yard. And then below that, the RV or boat is going to be less than 12 feet in height, 8 feet wide, and there will be no restrictions as long as it does not encroach into the public right-of-way. One of the questions we had last time is what is the distance between like the nose of the boat or the nose of the RV to the home? There's no restriction, and that's been cleared through our building inspector and through fire as well. These are the side yard setbacks. Again, these were presented last time, but the distances where it says at least 3 feet were 5. So we were able to make that change, so they will now read less than 8 feet in height will be 1.5 feet from the property line, at least 3 feet from any building used for human occupancy, and at least 3 feet from any building overhang attached to a building used for human occupancy. And then for an RV or boat that is greater than 8 feet in height but less than 12 feet in height, it must be located at least 3 feet away from any property line, at least 3 feet away from any building used for human occupancy, at least 3 feet away from any building overhang attached to a building used for human occupancy. Again, these were clarified and confirmed through our building official and through fire. Also, for the rear, there is no written limit for how much can be stored in the back. That was another question, and they must be stored on a paved surface. Oops, sorry. And again, these were presented last time, but just so we're clear on what is a prohibited use, the use for human habitation or occupancy at any time that's located on a private property as permitted here within, just meaning you can't have anybody living within the RV on the private property. It cannot be permanently connected to sewer, water lines, electricity connections. The use of electricity or propane is prohibited only when necessary to prepare a recreational vehicle for immediate use. I know this was another item that had been brought up at the last meeting, but again, the intent behind this is we're just trying to make sure people aren't living within the RV. So if someone's just taking their time getting ready, that's absolutely acceptable. And lastly, it cannot be used for the storage of goods, materials, and equipment other than those items considered to be a part of the unit or essential for immediate use. Are there any questions in regards to the amendments that were made?
Any questions on the ordinance?
I have none at this time.
I have a quick question. So first of all, thank you for making the changes. It looks, it looks a lot better, and I think it reflects more what we were trying to convey. So I appreciate the changes that you made. So can you just speak a little bit to the 3 feet, at 3 feet away from any property line and from any, from any building specifically? Last time we talked about when they're parked in front of, like on their driveway, maybe in front of a garage, for example, it would still have to be 3 feet from the garage door?
So for clarification, that wouldn't apply to the front space anymore. These setbacks would strictly apply to the side yard space.
Okay, so the part that says 3 feet from any building, even if it's parked then in front of a garage where there's a garage door, then this does not apply to that, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Yes. So
Okay.
in the ordinance, the way that it's written, side yard setbacks, or I don't know if it actually says side yard setbacks, but it's given a greater bullet point in the row of restrictions.
Okay.
And then these two are sub-bullets of requirements in the side yard only.
Okay.
So they only apply to the side yard.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have a quick comment. The reason, my understanding, the reason why you can park it up to your garage is because you don't really need to get around the garage, but you do need to get, like for firefighters or emergency purposes, they need to get through the side yard. That's why they need a 3 feet space. Is that what I'm coming? My idea. Is that what it means?
Yeah, and it's for, I don't know if it's necessarily because they need to get through, but it is a setback, so it's kind of being considered a structure in a way if it's being stored permanently. So that's just this minimum setback required by the building codes.
Any further questions? Okay, without any further questions, I'll open up the public hearing now. At 10 minutes after 6, any speaker cards on this?
Yes, we do. George Lewis.
Good evening, George.
Good evening. I want to thank you for hearing this so early this time. I think I got out of here 2 minutes after 12 on the 11th, so this is much better.
We moved it up, too, for you.
I think the discussion that we had last time and what I was requesting has been handled with these changes, because if I understand that if your vehicle is, if you have 20 feet from the ball of your hitch to the back of your trailer, and you have 20 feet from the back of the sidewalk to your garage door, you can park that vehicle legally there. And the only question, I think, and that doesn't bother me, I think you said 18 inches on a small vehicle from a side yard in the front yard. Or from is that true?
The side yard.
Yeah. So, okay. I don't think I have. I think this meets the concerns that I had, and so, the couple that were here, Mr. Markham was here last time, but they're off with their trailer traveling, so they are not here.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there any questions?
No, but thank you, George, and thanks for being patient last commission meeting. Appreciate that. Any other speakers on ordinance, draft ordinance?
That's it.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing now at 12 minutes after 6. So I'm happy we're moving this one along. I know I've said enough about it on my views, and I think I appreciate you tweaking this ordinance so it does make sense and it's going to benefit the community. Thank you very much. Any comments on this? So we're just going to take a vote to move this to the City Council for their approval.
Correct.
I entertain a motion for that. I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion that we approve this draft ordinance as it presented and move it to the City Council for their approval. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, we recommend to the City Council.
Yeah.
The resolution number will be 2019-19.
Thank you. Resolution number 2019-19. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. And that item has been approved.
Do you have a written copy of that, those things that are on the slide?
Yes, we can get you a copy, but there is also the full packet in the lobby.
That I can take?
We can get you a copy that you can take.
Okay. Thanks again, George. You're welcome.
George.
Okay, let's go to item number 2. Site and Architectural Review number 2019-6. Brandon Whalen / Hawkins Companies. The applicant is requesting site and architectural approval for the construction of a 9,017 square feet healthcare facility on approximately 1.15 acre site within the Hollister Farms commercial subdivision project. The project is located within the general commercial GC zoning district west of Highway 25 and north of Tres Pinos Road, further identified as San Benito County Assessor parcel number 056-250-065. CEQA's mitigated negative declaration. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner
You're
Huboy. As mentioned, this is a site and architectural review approval for the construction of a 9,017 square foot healthcare facility on Pad 6 of the Hawkins Company previously approved tentative map off of Park Street and Highway 25. The map was approved in 2017. The healthcare facility would be located at the southeast corner, and on your screen, north is to the right. The southeast corner of McCrae Street and Gibbs Drive within the Hollister Farms subdivision. And the 9,000 square foot building will house a healthcare facility, which will operate 6 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. with approximately 15 employees. The southern elevation will contain the main entrance to the building and will face the rest of the Hollister Farms development. The main entrance will be on the eastern portion of the building with dark gray metal wall panels surrounding a glass and aluminum frame storefront. There will be metal awnings which project over the entrance walkway area, and the central section of the building will have cement plaster walls and siding broken up by wooden panel awning features which frame 4 smaller windows. The windows in the awnings will be complemented by 3 decorative columns which will have a dark gray brick veneer. There will be a light gray brick veneer column which separates the smaller storefront entrance and exit, which faces west towards McCrae Street and wraps around to the southern elevation. I'm sorry, I believe that's supposed to say western elevation. And the western elevation will have a smaller exit from an office area inside, which will match the main entry. The exit will have metal awnings that wrap around and a wooden paneled awning feature as well. The northern section of the facade will be cement plaster siding, which is broken up by 2 recessed panels, which will be painted in light gray with the light gray brick veneer bottom trim. The northern elevation will face Gibbs Drive and will be cement plaster paneling in a dark gray, brown, and light gray. The central portion of the building will reflect the same design of the southern elevation with the columns and with the wood-paneled awning features and windows. The eastern end of the building on this elevation will be dark gray plaster siding with a large area for placing a business sign that faces north to Gibbs Drive towards the industrial businesses that are there. And finally, the eastern elevation will face towards Highway 25 into the parking lot of the shopping center. And there will be a customer entryway, which is the continuation of the southern entrance with the glass storefront and awnings and the metal paneling. The central portion has that same brick veneer, columns, windows, and the wood awning feature. And then the right side here has the kind of man door, roll-up door, which blend into the cement plaster panels of this facade. For landscaping, there'll be trees, shrubs, ornamental grasses, and ground cover throughout the medians in the parking lot. There'll be largely along Gibbs Drive, and that's actually McCrae Street. And East Park, framing the parking lot, and this is actually the edge of the subdivision, so this will kind of frame the entrance and exits of the subdivision. The applicant is proposing to landscape 24,200 square feet of the approximately 50,000 square foot parcel, which is almost 50% landscaping, and per section 17.08, the applicant meets and exceeds the 5% landscaping requirement of the commercial zoning district. For parking, access to the site will be provided from East Park Street to the south and Gibbs Drive to the north. There will be no direct access off of Highway 25 or McCrae. The applicant meets the number of required parking spaces with 60 parking spaces, which is exactly the required amount. They will have 55 standard parking spaces, 2 compact spaces, and 3 ADA spaces. And then the applicant also meets and exceeds the bike parking requirement. They are required to have 3.6, so 4 bike parking spaces, and they actually have 4 short-term bike parking spaces and 4 long-term bike parking spaces, which are matching throughout the whole development. They have kind of bike lockers and then just bike racks. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the applicant's request, receive all written and oral testimony regarding the proposal, and approve site and architectural review number 2019-6, subject to the findings and conditions contained in the draft resolution. Are there any questions for staff?
Any questions?
Staff report says the location is, let's see, south of East Park Street.
It's the southeast corner of Gibbs, which is on the right side of your screen, and McCrae. So, but it's actually the northwest corner of the development.
Okay, this must be a typo on the location then.
I would expect sometime in the future with the healthcare facility that there might be a monument sign or something to address for the general public, to let them know the location, because it's fairly, with that landscaping, it's going to be kind of concealed there. So I would think that for a healthcare facility, you would need to have a monument sign.
There is a master plan for the overall center, and I don't know if the health center has its own monument sign or if they're proposed to have one. If they are proposed to build one that's not included in this site and architectural review, they will have to come before the commission again for that. But there may be a tenant sign located not necessarily on this parcel that directs to the healthcare facility. The applicant is here, and they may be able to address that question as well.
All right, any other questions on the staff report?
I have no speaker cards, but I'm sure the applicants.
Okay, I'm going to open up the public hearing right now at 6:22. Speaker cards on this item? Would the applicant in the audience care to address the commission?
And he does have a presentation, so let me just pull that up.
Greetings, Chair Haboy and members of the Hollister Planning Commission. My name is Brandon Whalen with Hawkins Companies in Boise, Idaho. Address 855 Broad Street, Boise 83706. We're happy to be here before you tonight to share our plans for a 9,017 square foot healthcare facility as stated by Planner Kelly. The overall plan that was presented to you when we originally came showed retails 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as our inline boxes. And then we also presented Shops 1, which is a 12,000 square foot retail building out on Highway 25 and Park. You can see that building under construction right now. And then we followed up with Shops 2, which is shown on this plan here. Last time we were here before you, many of you members were being sworn in that evening, and we had that application before you. It was going to be half retail, half restaurant. So that was approved in that evening. There was also recently before you a Denny's restaurant that came through for site and architectural review. They would be just to the left of the area shaded here. And then also Panera came in and you approved them for their site and architectural review there. So things are happening here on our plan, and we're moving forward, and we're very happy to be for you tonight talking about the healthcare facility on Pad 7. But just to refresh our memories, last time we were here, there was a question about the previous approvals that were in place. And so this does show the inline stores that were approved originally. And you can see there's a palette of materials and designs that are, no, they're not monotone or replicated, but use of various materials, building articulations, moving roof lines. We tried to create interest, but then also some harmony within the center. And we think that you've seen that both in the Shops buildings that we've presented, the Denny's as well as the Panera. And we expect another application to be submitted very shortly to be used on the property just north of the Panera property. So this is the elevations that were approved for the Shops 1 building that's under construction right now, 12,000 square feet, and I think we have 6 different retail users already planned to occupy that once it's completed. This is Shops 2 that was before you that evening that some of you were sworn in. Half of it's going to be a retail store. The other half would be a restaurant with a drive-through. And before we hear tonight is the satellite healthcare facility, as was described by Planner Kelly quite eloquently, talking about the materials that we would use and the layout of the building. She also very well described the landscaping that meets and or exceeds the requirements by the city's development standards. And she also talked about the access to Park and to Gibbs Drive. And this is just another depiction of the materials and colors that are used throughout the entire center. So we're trying to work within the palette using the same materials, but adding variety to keep it interesting. So with that, we would like to respectfully request site and architectural review of a 9,017 square foot healthcare facility within the Hollister Farms commercial development, which is located within the general commercial zoning district, and I believe we're calling it 2019-6. So I would stand for any questions that you would have at this point in time.
Any questions for Mr. Whalen?
I would like to address the signage issue that you brought up.
Okay.
We do have a master sign plan that is in place for the entire shopping center, and we have distinguished kind of 3 different levels of signage. Center signs that will be out on the state highway. Those are the larger signs, and those will depict, they'll have panels for all of the different users within the center. And then we have entryway monument signs that are smaller, and those entrances as you're coming off of Park, coming into the shopping center, either to the left or the right, there will be larger monuments there to direct you to the tenants that are there. And then there are also smaller monument signs per the pad. And so I think for this facility here, we do have space on the entryway monuments allocated for the healthcare facility. But that is within the master sign plan that has already been approved. We're just reserving spaces on those signs, so we're not cluttering up with a bunch of different signs. We're grouping the signs together and giving each of the tenants a panel on those signs.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Whalen, the applicant?
In your landscaping, I'm looking at, is it like seating, like outside seating area? So it seems like there's like two sections that seem a little bit bigger landscape-wise. I was just curious about that.
I don't recall. I think that we have some seating areas.
Yeah, like the top right corner up there, there's like a huge, I don't know, it looks like a seating area, but there's like a lot of landscaping. And then just to the left of it, I was just curious.
I don't think that we had planned to have a seating area there. The main entrance is to the south of the building from that perspective. Where the inlines are, we do have some seating areas there. This facility is proposed for dialysis to occur. And so most of those operations are just going to be conducted in the building. Yeah. And so we hadn't allocated, I think, outside seating for here. But there is outside seating within the development.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, essentially, the trees there that are bordering Prospector Avenue, Gibbs Drive, those are all evergreen, are they, pretty much?
No, there should be a mix, some evergreen and some deciduous, and so we have color throughout the season, but then the evergreens will always provide that visual barrier. It's always a balance between having enough landscaping that meets the city's requirements, but then also the tenant wants to make sure that they have visibility, and so we try to balance both of those needs and come up with something that satisfies both of those concerns.
Getting good solar access from the south direction there, looks like. I have no further questions. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Whalen. I appreciate that. Any other speakers on this item? Okay. I'll close the public hearing now at 6:30. Bring it back to the commission. Discussion on this? It's all consistent within what we've been improving in the past, at least on the vernacular of the architectural style. And
the use is really awesome. It's a use that we need for the community, hands down. So.
I agree, and I think it's well laid out, well done. I like the landscaping. Okay, well, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve site and architecture review application number 2019-6, subject to the findings and conditions contained in the draft resolution.
Thank you.
Right?
And the resolution number is
2019-20.
2019-20.
Yeah, 2019-6.
The resolution number is 2019-20.
Resolution number 2019-6.
Thank you.
Do I have a second on this?
I'll second.
Further discussion? I have a second, motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
This item has been approved. Congratulations.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you. Okay. Now we go to item number 3, which is a site and architectural review 2019-11. Jeremy Vanderkratz, signs by Van. The applicant is requesting site and architectural approval of a master sign program for the installation of a new freestanding multi-tenant sign in an existing commercial shopping center on 2 parcels, which are 2.45 and 3.72 acres in size. The project is within the general commercial GC zoning district, located at 341 and 351 Tres Pinos Road, further identified as San Benito County Assessor parcel number 057-230-022, CEQA categorically exempt.
Thank you, Commissioner. The applicant is requesting approval for the construction of an approximately 7-foot by 12-foot freestanding monument sign at 341 and 351 Tres Pinos Road in the General Commercial Zoning District as part of a larger master sign program for the existing commercial shopping center at that location. The sign is proposed to be located within an existing parking lot median on the western side of the shopping center, south of the central vehicle access road off of Tres Pinos. And it is proposed to be constructed out of 2 pillars with stone veneer and 5 wooden boards that span the width between them, each with 2 rectangular tenant panels that show the tenant signs. Currently, there are 6 existing tenants, and there are 4 vacant spaces. So the applicant has informed me that as those tenant spaces fill, the sign they will replace, and they have a mechanism where they can replace these exact signs relatively quickly and fill in and change the tenant spaces. The monument sign is capped by a wooden beam that has the address 351 Tres Pinos Road, which is the back parcel that it's located on. For landscaping, the applicant is proposing to remove the existing landscaping for the placement of the multi-tenant freestanding sign. And around the base of the sign, there'll be bark and mulch. There is a condition that they provide a landscaping plan to the planning department for review prior to approval of a building permit. And I talked to the applicant, and they informed me that they were going to replace landscaping that is similar to what's existing that fits with the newly placed sign. So there will be new landscaping. It just won't. They do have to remove some to put in the sign. The monument sign is non-illuminated, but it will be located underneath an existing street lamp for the parking lot, and so it will be lit by that light. And there is an existing multi-tenant sign for the businesses in the shopping center, which is located to the north of the proposed sign at the entrance off Tres Pinos Road. This monument sign is located at least 100 feet away from the proposed sign. I think it's approximately 250 feet away, which is required for our signs section of our ordinance. And for this mid-sized shopping center, the approval of a master sign program can allow for up to 1 freestanding sign per 300 feet of lineal street frontage. So this shopping center has about 1,500 feet of lineal street frontage, and so they can be permitted by the Planning Commission to have a second freestanding sign. The proposed monument sign is a second multi-tenant sign, and the purpose is to draw customers to the back shops here, which are hidden by the other building in the shopping center from Tres Pinos Road. So as customers enter the shopping center, they'll be further directed to these back tenants, is their intent. And the master sign program for the shopping center, with the approval of this proposed sign, would provide a guideline for any future signage in the center. And it does match the rectangular pieces. They match the kind of existing signage on the buildings. Excuse me, this way. I don't know if you can't really tell, but I could have gotten a better picture for you. But they all have kind of a rectangular white background sign on each of the tenant spaces. And so this is kind of reflective of those existing signage pieces. And so with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission review the applicant's request, receive all written and oral testimony regarding the proposal, and consider approving Site and Architectural Review 2019-11, subject to the findings and conditions contained in the draft resolution.
Thank you, Eva. Any questions on the staff report? So if I understand that this sign that we're subject to approval will be setting a template for future signs.
Correct.
That type of from a kind of a mission style to more of a craftsman style, I would say. Okay. All right. Without any further questions, I'll open up the public hearing now at 6:37. Do you have any speaker cards on this item?
We do not.
Anyone care to address the commission on this item? I'll close the public hearing then at 6:37. I think that what we're looking at, the design looks, it's an improvement over the existing sign, in my view.
I agree.
Yeah, I like it.
And I'll just speak to the purpose. It makes sense. I drive in that little shopping center all the time, and it isn't clear what's back there when you're in that back parking lot. So that makes complete sense to me to have that second signage. Although I do agree with Commissioner Haboy that this new sign is actually better looking than this other one. That it would be nice if they matched, but I think it's fine. I think it's a good sign. I think it has a real purpose.
Like you were saying, the same thing. I didn't even know that there was a YMCA back there for almost 4 years. So I'm kind of really excited to see that because they offer a lot of good programs for kids and adults alike. So to be able to bring more business to the people that are back there in the karate, I'm really glad to see this.
Agreed. Kevin, any comments?
I guess I have a question. What is the orientation of the sign relative to Traspinos Road? Is it facing it?
Yes. So if we were coming in from Tres Pinos Road to this driving south into the shopping center, we would be looking at the face of the sign.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion on this item?
What is the existing sign that's out facing Tres Pinos Road now? Is there any plans on updating that?
I don't know if there's plans on updating it, but if they ever did want to make any changes, they would need to bring it into compliance and do a true update to match.
And just to add to what Eva's saying, within the shopping center, we've been recently getting more applications in for individual buildings that we're seeing that are upgrading their facades. So at some point, they very well could be changing this too.
Okay. What is the pleasure of the Planning Commission on this item?
I will make the motion to approve the site and architectural review PC.
The site and architectural number is 2019-11, and the resolution will be 2019-21.
Site and architectural review application number 2019-11, subject to the findings and conditions contained in the draft resolution with PC
21.
2019-21.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item number 3 has been approved. Okay. We go on to item number 4, amendments to Title 16 subdivisions and 17 zoning to the Hollister Municipal Code. An ordinance to amend miscellaneous sections of Title 17 zoning and Title 16 subdivisions to assure internal consistency and minor clarifications in the Hollister Municipal Code for additions, clarifications, and corrections to standards for accessory second units, open space requirements in residential zoning districts, park and recreation area dedications and fees, vehicle sales in the downtown commercial mixed-use zoning district, DMU except in the downtown and Monterey Street historic districts, home occupation permits pertaining to cottage foods, industrial zoning district design standards, residential zoning districts definitions, residential land uses and permit requirements, building sign requirements by zoning district, minimum lot area per dwelling unit, residential densities in the downtown commercial mixed-use DMU zoning district, variation of design of residences and residential fences, CEQA categorically categorical exemption.
Thank you. It's me again. So as you know, there were several various sections of both Title 16 and Title 17, which were noticed for tonight's meeting. However, only the following items are being brought for consideration and recommendation to the City Council. Those would be residential zoning district definitions, residential land uses and permit requirements, standards for accessory dwelling units, vehicle sales in the downtown mixed-use zoning district, and minor corrections to the general provisions for signs. And so the planning and engineering departments have prepared a presentation on the rest of the proposed amendments, which were noticed but are not being considered for recommendation to the council. And so if it is the pleasure of the commission, we would like to present the amendments which are being considered for recommendation to the council first, and open the public hearing, and if the commission would like to make a motion, do that. And then present the informational reports in the Planning Commission report section of our agenda, just so that the general plan selection of the GPAC member, if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on that, they're not held up by an informational report. So if that's the pleasure of the commission, that would be what we'd like to do.
Okay, proceed.
Thank you. So the first section of the zoning code that we would like to amend is section 1702.020, the definition section. And the goal of this was to create clear defined housing types that cover the range of different development, which can then be used as a base for the rest of the zoning code in both our current proposed amendments as well as any future amendments. So the first thing we would like to do is the current code defines both a guest house and a secondary residential unit. Guest house isn't really referenced anywhere in the code, and it's not permitted per our land use permit requirements in any of our zoning code. And essentially it's categorized by as an accessory structure, which is permitted, and it has its own rules and regulations based on 171620 of the code. And so we'd like to just remove this definition as it's not really utilized. And then for the secondary residential unit, it's referred to in the code as an accessory dwelling unit in most sections. And so we just like to make that consistent across the board and add on that a reference to section 1722.040, which is our accessory dwelling unit code section. Another definition that we'd like to change, currently we define duplex, triplex, and fourplex units and a dwelling group as kind of multi-family units, but duplex, triplex, and fourplex, they're specified that they're in the same structure. And what we'd like to redefine them as is a group of 2, 3, or 4 units, respectively, that are either attached or detached, but they're on one lot. So there's one common ownership, and it's multifamily, regardless of whether it's attached or detached. And then, yeah.
If I just might jump in here for a second on going on the accessory dwelling unit, that can be attached or detached, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, and feel free to stop me and ask questions, because we're going to go through several sections. So, and then we'd also like to define an apartment, which is not currently defined, as just 5 or more. So essentially there's 2, 3, 4, and 5 or more, which are all multifamily, and what they're defined as is being multiple units on one lot. Did you have a question, Commissioner Munzer?
I'll save it.
Okay.
I'm just curious whether or not there is a definition that is corresponding to that in the building code. Do you?
I don't know. I could look.
I'll check that out.
And another thing that we would want is the duplex, triplex, fourplex, and apartments would be multi-family housing, but currently we don't have any definition for single-family housing, and we'd like to introduce definitions that are not only your classic single-family detached unit, but also single-family attached units, which could be like townhomes, which is going to be 3 or more that are attached, but they're defined by being on separate lots. So they would share a wall along a lot line, and a duet would just be a pair. So 2 units that share and have their own lot. And then we currently define multifamily housing as a residential structure with more than 1 dwelling units in the same building or 2 or more residential structures on the same lot. So this is where kind of the duplex, triplex, fourplex being on the same lot came from, because we currently define if they're detached as multifamily but not as a duplex, right? If there's 2 units on 1 lot, it's considered multifamily, but it's not a duplex. So it's just, there's some contradiction, and we'd like to cover the range and make sure that there's less contradiction. And so we just define multifamily in kind of a super definition as duplex, triplexes, fourplexes, and apartments, as well as residential condominiums, which are defined and covered through Section 1617 of the code. And I believe that those are all of the definitions. So were there any questions that I could clarify on this section?
Any questions on this section on the duplexes and multifamily units?
So this is just clarification for the definitions in regards to subdivisions.
Correct. It would be clarification in regards to any housing project. So that if someone says, I want to come in and build a townhome, we'd say that's single-family attached, because I think right now there's kind of, particularly with townhomes, there's more of an architectural appearance to them. That's where we say it's a townhome, but we'd like to make it clear that, a townhome isn't necessarily just something that's 3 stories and is, it's on its own lot. It would be something that has to be attached in a row. That's a townhome. Otherwise, it would just be single family. So it wouldn't necessarily depend on the architectural style of the house. It would depend on the actual kind of ownership situation, if that makes sense.
Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is there a current ordinance in place in regards to secondary dwelling, or does it default to the SB 1069?
We default to SB 1069, but then we have our own accessory dwelling units section of the code. It's 1722.040 that goes over all of the rules and regulations and requirements of accessory dwelling units within the City of Hollister.
Okay, and this, we're just clarifying.
We're just clarifying the definition.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So moving on to the second section of the code, which we are proposing to amend, this is 1704.020, which is our land uses and permit requirements, table 1704-1. And what we'd like to do is to replace the definitions that are currently in the table, those are in the gray, and replace them with the newly defined definitions. Everything is kept the same. The only ones that are changing slightly are here in blue, and this one here in residential west of Fairview for duplex, it should be kept the same. So in the draft resolution, we would propose an amendment to the draft resolution that keeps this as permitted with the note 4 that's existing for residential west of Fairview. But as you can see, like multifamily housing is being replaced with the apartments and duplex, and they're similar to or exactly the same as what's currently in existence. It's just a replacement with the new definition. One thing that we are changing would be to not permit duets in the R2 zoning district, because the duets or the R2 is defined as having housing that is either attached 2 units on one lot or 2 detached units on one lot in the purposes section of our zoning code. And so with the new definitions, that would be only a duplex, not a duet. We are adding a few notes.
Just a second.
Yeah.
On the duets and duplexes, would you mind going back and letting us know what the difference is between those two?
Sure. Duets would be 2 attached units that are each on a separate lot. So they're single family, but they're attached, but it's just a pair. So versus single-family attached would be 3 or more. And then a duplex would be 2 units on 1 lot.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to add a note 15 next to condominiums, which references the chapter 16.17, which talks about the condominium conversion requirements already in existence in our code. So we just like to add this note to reference to that. And then currently the condominiums townhomes line, it has a CUP for Old Town Medium and Old Town High. All condominium projects require a conditional use permit for a planned unit development application, regardless of any other entitlements. It would be like a tentative map. If you were dividing and then building single-family detached units, you wouldn't. It doesn't say you're required to have any permit, but you would be required to have a tentative map. So the condos automatically are required to have a conditional use permit. That's just how you do a condo map. So it's not referenced in our permit requirements table.
Is it correct to say that any project that requires a tentative map would also require a conditional use permit?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily?
That's correct. Thanks, Mr. Chair. There can be a project that is wants to subdivide into a major subdivision, 5 units, 5 lots or more, and as long as it meets the code, the minimum lot size, the required setbacks, side yard, front yard, rear yard, lot coverage, it'll be specifically just a tentative map. If the property is within a performance overlay zone, and they want to include, maybe it's a single, say for example, it's a low density residential area where only single family homes are permitted, but because lately what we've done is recommended, because of the need that we have for multifamily, we require that, not require, but we encourage the applicant to also put in a mixture of multifamily units. Then only at that point, then in order to achieve that, we would have to go through a conditional use permit. But to answer your question, not all projects require both. Okay. If it's a standard subdivision that meets all the requirements without having to variate, then it's just a standard tentative map.
So as long as there's no variation in the zone designation,
exactly,
tentative map does not necessarily require a conditional use permit.
Exactly, that's what it is.
Thank you.
And then, as Abraham happened to mention, the performance overlay zoning district, and if you utilize a standard, say you reduce a setback in the performance overlay, you would require a conditional use permit. And so we'd like to add this note 16 to the PZ zone column, just to clarify that. Because if you are in the PZ and you do, say, a duplex in an R1, because you're in the PZ, which allows that, you would still need a conditional use permit. So this section is just clarifying the new definitions. And then we'd also like to change it currently reads second dwelling units in this same table, and we just like to change that to accessory dwelling units, which keeps it consistent with the code, and amend note 6 to read, accessory dwelling units are permitted where performance standards in section 1722.040 accessory dwelling units can be met, and add, accessory dwelling units are permitted only on lots occupied by one existing or proposed detached single-family dwelling. Were there any questions on this table amendments?
Any questions? Okay.
The next section is our 1722.040 accessory dwelling units section. The current minimum lot size for interior lots is 7,000 square feet in order to be able to put a permitted accessory dwelling unit. And we would propose that it be changed to reduce it to 6,750 square feet on an interior lot. There are a couple reasons for this. We have had several people come in, applicants or potential applicants who live in the city, and they have lots that are just shy of 7,000, 6,900, 6,850. And so they don't meet that requirement, but they would be able to meet all setback requirements, all lot coverage requirements. They understand and are willing to pay impact fees that ADUs are subject to. They know the process is an administrative permit review, and they understand that process. But because of this restriction only, they aren't allowed to put in an ADU, so a true small rental unit, which is something that the city needs as rental stock, affordable housing. And so we would propose that it be reduced 250 square feet, just to allow people who can meet all the other requirements of the section, and this is their only restriction, to be able to put a legal unit on their lot. And it would also help us to allow legally permitted ADUs on lots that don't meet this requirement, but maybe had a code enforcement violation for having an illegal unit. And some of those don't meet the minimum lot size, and so they are forced to either remove their existing unit that's illegal or tear out the kitchen, even if they're willing to go through the process. So we'd like to recommend this change to the ADU section.
Is it also correct to say that this kind of goes along with 1026?
I would say so, yes. The state likes to encourage cities to be as flexible as possible with ADUs, to encourage as many people to build them as possible.
Okay.
And we'd also like to change one other section of the accessory dwelling units, which is section K, which talks about the separate metering for electricity and gas, etc. As previously mentioned, accessory dwelling units are subject to impact fees, not the sewer or water impact fees, but all of the others, traffic, police, fire. And it already is current practice to charge them at multifamily rates as applicable. Some of them are just straight flat rates, but for ones that aren't straight flat rates and have a multifamily component or based off like studio or one bedroom, that's how ADUs are charged impact fees. So we just like to clarify this because in the multifamily definition that we clarified, ADUs don't make a parcel multifamily. That makes sense. Were there any questions on the ADU section? Okay. And the final proposed amendment, which is being considered for recommendation to the council. Oh, I'm sorry, this isn't the final, this is second to final. This is the commercial and mixed-use zone uses and permit requirements. The City Council has directed staff for this amendment to amend the zoning ordinance to allow outdoor vehicle sales within the downtown commercial and mixed-use zoning district. They would not be allowed within the downtown or the Monterey Street historic districts, which are part of but don't encompass the whole downtown mixed-use zoning district. So we're proposing an amendment to Table 1708-1 to accommodate the City Council's direction. This is due in part to the fault in downtown, and there have been studies and some lots have been found to be non-buildable or vastly non-buildable due to the fault and the distance of the fault. And so it creates non-buildable areas. And so that pretty much restricts all uses because you would have to have a building for most all of the uses allowed in downtown. And so this would help some of those lots have the opportunity for a use that's permitted in the downtown. This would also help all lots in the downtown as long as they're not in the Monterey or downtown historic district.
So just to be more specific, let's say the vacant lot next to the Veterans Building, you would allow car sales there?
I believe that would be in the historic district, but if it wasn't, yes. But I think next to the Vets Building is going to be in the downtown.
Even though the downtown is a mixed-use designation, it's not, you're not allowing car sales within the historic portion of that. That's from 4th all the way to South, I believe, San Benito Street.
Correct.
Is that
And
correct?
then also the Monterey Street Historic District, which runs along Monterey.
I just want to distinguish that.
Yes. So it'd be everywhere that is not in either of the two historic districts.
Okay. And I would adamantly agree with that.
This section, 1720.090, is the final section being proposed for recommendation to the council. I was actually talking with staff about sign regulations, and we were looking at the commercial mixed-use maximum allowed signage as a question had come up by an applicant. And Abraham, I was talking to Abraham, and he was like, it's 200 square feet as the maximum allowed, and the table says 20. And so we'd like to add on a 0 to make it 200 square feet as the maximum size for one individual wall sign in the commercial mixed-use zoning district. And they're also restricted to 300 square feet maximum per business of wall sign square footage. And they're also restricted on their maximum size based on the length of their building. So they can only have, so if you have a 100-foot commercial building, you can have 2 square feet per linear foot. So then I guess that would make you the maximum size. But if you had a 50 square foot building, you could only have, or 50-foot building, you could have 100 square foot maximum size sign. So we'd like to make that correction to this table. And then we'd also like to move tables 1721A, 1721B, figure 1722, table 1722, and table 1723 from the current section, which they're actually in public facility, institutional, and open space regulations, to the general provisions section of the sign ordinance, as they all have to do with general sign regulations: the maximum size, the maximum permitted signs, the location of window signs, the size of kiosks and freestanding signs that are allowed in each of the zoning districts. So they're just kind of not in a good spot because they're not actually referring to public facility, institutional, and open space signs. They're general sign tables. Those are the 2 proposed sign changes, if there were any questions on that. And that concludes my presentation for the recommendation to council. So I would recommend that you review the proposed amendments to Title 17 zoning, receive all written and oral testimony regarding the proposal, and make the following motion, which would be to adopt PC resolution, and this will be 2019-22, to recommend to the City Council the adoption of the amendments to Title 17 zoning of the Hollister Municipal Code with the following change, and it will actually be 2 changes to the draft resolution. The proposed new definition for duplex, triplex, fourplex shall read as follows. I currently have it, and I'll actually show you because I forgot to mention it. It says dash, like it says residential dwelling unit, duplex, triplex, fourplex, and a hyphen and a capital A. And all of the other definitions in the code just go through the definition and they say means A. So we just like to make that change to the draft ordinance so that everything's consistent. And then the other change would be to change the duplex definition on the residential Western Fairview from site and architectural 4, which is what it says in the draft resolution, back to P4, which is how it currently reads.
I have a question on going back to the impact fees on accessory dwelling units. Okay. What we're proposing here is impact fees would be for like multifamily.
Correct.
What is the current? It doesn't have to be exact, but let's say the impact fee for single family detached as compared to accessory dwelling unit. What is the
impact fee for a single family detached? I believe it is approximately $50,000, but it does include the water and sewer. So the main difference between if you had charged, say, an ADU as a single family versus an ADU as a multifamily would be the traffic impact fee. For single family, it's about $19,000, and for a multifamily, it is, I believe it's $11,900, and it's further reduced based on the number of bedrooms. So like a studio is even less than that. So an ADU currently is charged the $11,000, or I think it's like 9 or 10 for like a one bedroom. So that's currently how we charge ADUs. We just like to clarify, and so it's 10 versus about 19,000 on the traffic impact fee.
I'm just curious, and this might be subject for future conversation about tiny homes. I don't know if there's anything in our current zoning ordinance that addresses tiny homes, but it would be, I'd be interested to see how impact fees would be categorized for quote-unquote tiny homes, if that ever comes to fruition in the City of Hollister.
Yeah, I think it could be a further discussion, but also the impact fee for traffic would be, if it was a studio tiny home or a one-bedroom tiny home, it would be charged the one-bedroom also. So single families also can have that reduced traffic impact fee, but we just wanted to clarify that even if somehow you made an ADU that had 3 bedrooms, it would be charged the multifamily fee. It wouldn't be charged the single-family fee, even though the lot is still a single-family lot. It's a single-family unit with an ADU. It's not a duplex.
The other issue that, and again, subject for future conversation, is the affordability aspect of these access ADUs or tiny homes, and I think that I don't think there's anything in our current books that would allow flexibility for impact fees based on affordability. But I think that is subject for future conversation.
Yeah,
definitely.
Correct.
Okay. Maybe when we go through the general plan update. I don't have any other comments. Any other questions or comments on these amendments?
On this, the commercial and mixed use, the changing from 20 to 200, is mixed use referring to DMU, downtown mixed use, or is there another designation on top of DMU?
We actually have 3 mixed-use zones in the city. There's downtown mixed use, then there's the West Gateway mixed use, which is on 4th Street heading east out of town, and then we also have the neighborhood mixed use, which I believe encompasses like the Clock Tower Plaza off McRae. And so there's 3 different mixed use. Each has different density requirements, downtown mixed use being the highest. And I believe West Gateway goes down to the lowest at 20 units per acre. But yes, so it would cover, this particular change would cover all commercial wall signs within a commercial district. So commercial or mixed use commercial signage.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eva.
Thank you.
So, what is the direction on this?
I would recommend that you open the public hearing at this time, and then if there's any speakers, and then close the public hearing and make a motion.
Okay, I'll open up the public hearing now at 11 minutes past 7. Any speaker cards on this item?
None, unless there's someone from the public who'd like to talk.
Anyone from the public care to address the commission on these amendments? With no speakers, I close the public hearing now at 7:12. So I think what, in my view, is what you're proposing here is also, we refer to the subdivision map ordinance for the state. I think that, we also would, when we need to refer to that, I'm sure there's a link that we can, for our edification, that we can refer to, because there has been discussion on the subdivision map ordinance. Correct?
Correct. And as mentioned at the beginning, all of the items which were noticed, we are going to talk about. It's just not all are being proposed for recommendation. So the engineers are here as well as myself, and we each have prepared a presentation on several more zoning amendments that would be something that we would want the commission's consideration on and input, and then it would be something that would be brought back to the commission again for recommendation officially to the council, just as these ones are being recommended tonight.
I'm just going to follow up on some of my line of questioning there is that what I would like to see in the future is to expand this a little bit more and in terms of affordability for ADUs and also for these tiny homes and how that's going to be categorized in the future. Any comments, questions on this? Mr. Seth?
I have none.
Okay, so entertain a motion to recommend that we move this to the City Council.
Chairperson Huboy, have you closed the public?
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll go ahead and make the motion that we approve the recommendation and to go ahead and forward this recommendation to the City Council for their approval.
Could you make the motion with the proposed 2 amendments as well?
Yes, with the proposed 2 amendments as well.
Thank you. And that'll be Resolution 2019-22.
And adopt Resolution 2019-22.
I will second it.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So
Thank you.
move that forward.
Thank you.
And thank you. That's a lot of material there to digest. Okay, so moving on to the agenda here. Let's see. We're at the old business for the selection of the second planning commissioner member of the General Plan Advisory Committee. And Commissioner Munzer has an announcement to make on this.
Commissioner Huboy, with all due respect, before we jump the gun, the next item was new business.
Oh, new business. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Munzer. New business.
We currently have no new business at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, you have an announcement to make on this item.
Yes, so
business.
The subdivision presentation? Or
We'll be doing it in the planning department reports section because
okay.
they're informational.
Okay, thank you.
So in regards to the general plan advisory committee, I had made some mention that I was interested in that position. I've come to the conclusion that I am pretty much at capacity with my time, with other obligations between planning commission. I serve on other boards as well as work and a full-time father. And one of the things that being a full-time father leads me to is I just wanted to make mention on how important the general plan is. And I am a father of 3 daughters. My daughters on my wife's side are 4th generation to San Benito County. On my father's side, they're 5th generation to San Benito County, and on my mother's side, they're 6th generation to San Benito County. Wow. So I feel that there is a great obligation that we have to leave this community better off than how we have found it. And so I challenge whoever takes on this position to take it on, carefully, do your due diligence, and plan accordingly. I feel that being here, for so long, that you've seen this community go through quite a few changes. And I have seen this community grow where it has grown what I would say is out of control. And I've also seen the repercussions of no growth. So to come up with a perfect resolution is a difficult and a challenging task. But I think the solution resides in what everybody calls smart growth. I'd like to say that it's sustainable growth. And what do you do for sustainable growth? I think in a community that is balanced with residential as well as with business and commercial, you find the balance of sustainable growth, which then allows for the community to sustain itself in regards to tax revenue that supports the services that we need as far as police, fire protection, as well as a staff in which we have at the city. And as you see with each of these meetings, they do a heck of a job. And I think with a thoughtful plan in the general plan is very crucial. And so I just wanted to say my points that I had in regards to how important the general plan is, and that it is a great challenge. And I also challenge the community to get involved as they have an opportunity to leave their fingerprint on how they feel that this community can be left better than they had received it as well. So with that, whoever does take on that challenge, I know Mr. Huboy, you'll do a great job, and whoever else is appointed to that from the Planning Commission, and I know that the City Council will be representing a piece of that, as well as the community. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in regards to it, and congratulations to whoever who's appointed to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. And I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you stepping up and taking on the position as Planning Commissioner, because that in itself is a major commitment. And also, I respect your decision.
Thank you.
So as we discussed this in the past, we had one person or two persons that were interested in filling the position, and one was Seth, who has declined because of his family obligations, as he has eloquently expressed. And the other person that has expressed their interest was Commissioner Stevens. So are you still interested in that position, Commissioner Stevens?
I'm still very interested in that, so yes. And I appreciate what Commissioner Munzer just said, because I agree wholeheartedly. There's been a lot of growth and a lot of conflict in the community because of that growth. Both, I think there's valid concerns with what some people call uncontrolled growth, and others think that we don't have enough growth. I think the challenge, and this is what I wanted to tell our community and to tell the commission, the reasons that I want to be on it is that I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge of putting together the next plan, is dealing with that conflict, because this is a beautiful little city, beautiful community, and we've become really divided. So I hope that through this process there is a way to bring people together. Part of what I've done in the work that I've done professionally is around mediation and conflict resolution. And I think that when you bring a group of people together that have a shared goal and a shared desire, so in this case it would be to continue to make Hollister the great little city that it is, that we can agree to disagree on certain details about how Hollister grows or doesn't grow. But if we keep that commitment to keeping it this great place for families to live, for people to have 6 generations, as Commissioner Munzer just talked about his family, that just speaks to how people just want to be here. And when people continue to move in here, it again speaks to what people want to be here. So we have a really important obligation as, just citizens of this town to continue to make it better. I've worked more than 30 years with families and children and communities in different cities and in different addressing different or confronting different issues, challenging issues. A lot of those families were families that were low income, families that had in some way struggled or struggling in their lives in different ways. And my goal was always to help people to be the best that they could, help families to move forward, and especially to ensure that in their communities, people felt safe, they felt that they had opportunities, and that they felt like they could live a good life. And that's what I would bring to this board, advisory board for the putting together of the general plan, is that experience of working with communities. Many times communities were in conflict. And I've been trained in conflict resolution, and so I think that if I were to serve in this, if the commission would approve my participation in that board, I would bring that commitment to help bring people together. It's really important, as long as we continue to remind ourselves what we're here for. The other thing that I think is really important is having a clear plan that has some really solid goals. My criticism of the current general plan is that the goals are kind of vague, they're kind of ambiguous, and it's really hard to stay on task if you don't have clear goals. I've done a lot of work in strategic planning, in evaluations, where we're looking at whether or not programs or efforts have met goals. And I would bring that experience and challenge the group to make sure that we have some really solid, realistic, measurable, clear goals. And measurable is really important, because if we don't have a way to measure what we're doing, there's no way to hold people accountable. There's no way to know if we've gotten there. So that would be what I would bring. On top of that, at our last meeting, we had members of our community speak to the concerns of Spanish-speaking families, as well as having like a diverse group. Well, I'm just going to bring this out as who I am, just who I am as a person. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I speak Spanish, and I'm an animal lover. I take care of my elderly mom. So all of those are really important. Children, families, communities, the elderly, animals. So as I work on this, I would commit to keeping that at the forefront. So bringing those perspectives to this leadership group will be really important. Participation of all of our community is going to be really important, but the group that will set the tone for the meetings, that will guide the process, will be this body. So it's really important that we have people that have diverse perspectives, that have some skills around bringing people together, that can keep people focused, and also that can address conflict. So those are the things that I think I can bring to this group, and so I hope that my fellow commissioners will think that I can do a good job there, and will vote me in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Ms. Commissioner Henderson?
Yeah, I mean, since Commissioner Munzer is pulling his name from consideration, I would be interested in being considered as well. If he was in consideration, I would not, because I respect the seniority that he has and the experience. But since he has withdrawn, then I would like to put my name in for consideration as well.
Well, I appreciate that, Commissioner Henderson, but I'm ready to go ahead and make a nomination as chairman. I will nominate Commissioner Stevens to take on that position.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So shall we have a vote on that?
Yeah, it's the only thing, Chairperson Huboy, I'm not sure if Commissioner Henderson would also like to have that opportunity as you provided to speak a little bit about why he would be interested in serving the General Plan Advisory Committee. It's up to
I'd
you.
be happy to give Commissioner Henderson that opportunity. As we left our last Planning Commission meeting, it was down to two commissioners, Commissioner Munzer and Commissioner Stevens. And at this meeting tonight, Commissioner Henderson has expressed his interest. So, and we discussed to have I was prepared to have presentations both by Commissioner Munzer and Stevens and have the other commissioners rate that presentation. So, I mean, if you want to go back to that, we can. It's at the discretion of this board.
Yeah, it's totally up to the commission. You could do the rating part, or you can do, like you just did right now, a nomination. It's totally up to you. It's up to the commission.
What's the pleasure of the commission on that?
I mean, I support making a decision tonight. I wouldn't want to delay things, by having to put together a presentation and all that. So I wouldn't mind just having an opportunity to say why I would like to be considered. Also, this isn't news. I mean, I had emailed before the February 28th meeting, which I knew I wasn't going to be at. I had emailed, I forget, somebody in staff just saying, hey, I am interested in being, either on the sign committee and or the general plan committee as well. So,
but didn't at the last meeting you were nominated for the sign committee, and then I thought you expressed your expression was not interested in the general plan advisory committee.
Yeah, but like I said, it was based on the assumption that Commissioner Munzer was one of the people vying for the position, but since he has announced
Commissioner
tonight,
Munzer has declined, you've changed your mind on that.
Exactly.
Okay. Well,
is there also for this committee? Is there an alternate that is used at all?
I am not aware of an alternate.
If a commissioner is not able to attend the advisory committee, if there's an alternate commissioner that is appointed?
Good question. In the bylaws, it doesn't, to my recollection, it doesn't indicate an alternate. It does indicate excused absences and unexcused absences. And after a certain, I think it's 2 absences that are that occur. Then there would be another nomination for another commissioner or another city council member, or another member at large. But so it's the expectation is that the General Plan Advisory Committee is in attendance and all, and if they can't make it, then we would go with another member of for that committee.
Thank you.
Sure.
okay. Well, do you have? I'm going to give you an opportunity to make your presentation. But also, what I propose tonight is that we rate these two. We've heard Roxanne's presentation, and now we're going to hear Commissioner Henderson's presentation. We need to have pieces of paper, and on a 5-point scale, we'll rate these presentations, and we'll add the ratings, and whoever gets the most points will have that nomination.
Yep. If that's the desire of the commission, that's fine. If you prefer just doing a nomination, that's fine too.
I'm going to need 4 pieces of paper.
It's really up to the commission. Just so everyone is aware, the city council has had 2 vacancies over the past year and a half, actually 2, to fill council member positions. And so how they filled those were people presented, applicants presented to the council, and then a formal recommendation was made by someone at the dais, and they were voted on. And so, but it's up to the commission how you'd like to score or approve this person. So,
Well, I think that's what we talked about and agreed upon, that we were going to have this as a scoring format. So I'd like to propose that we do that.
I have a question, though. I mean, Commissioner Stevens, did you know you were given a presentation when you were talking, or was it, because I didn't realize that it was an actual formal presentation?
When we talked about it, we didn't talk about preparing a formal presentation, but just simply talking about our interests and what we would bring to the table. So it's kind of like what do you bring? Who are you? Why are you interested? Rather than a formal presentation. So Seth and I just were going to come and speak about ourselves and our interests and what we bring to the table. And so that's why I presented in the way that I presented. I did ask Commissioner Huboy if he wanted me to prepare a formal presentation, that I would do that, but we agreed not to do that.
Okay. So what I was wanting to clarify is that what you just presented is what you wanted to say. There was nothing else that you, nothing else you prepared that you wanted to share.
Well, no. I mean, I just wanted to be able to say that, that I think that having the different perspectives is really important. And so I want people to know that that's what the perspective that I bring as a mom, as a grandmother, as a social worker, as somebody who's worked with families, as somebody who speaks Spanish, who's worked with low income and families, as well as families who struggle. I want people to know that that's a perspective I bring, as well as the skills that I bring around strategic planning, evaluation, and conflict resolution. I think those are really important things to bring to the table for this advisory board. And so that's what I wanted to present. I can speak more. I mean, I can speak for hours about a lot of things, but those are the main points that I wanted to bring forward. And also just simply that I'm really interested in this because I think it's a very important effort. I have time. I'm working part-time only. I don't work full-time. I have a lot of stuff going on with my family. I serve on the Chamberlain's Board of Directors. I also am part of Rotary, and I'm really committed to those things, and also this. But I still have time, and I think I can devote a lot of time to the research that's involved, any kind of preparation that's involved. So I have time to do that, and I'm interested, and I would devote myself to that work. So that's it.
Can I call for a 2-minute recess, please? Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Commissioner Johnson, myself, and Commissioner Munzer each has a blank piece of paper. We've heard the informal presentation from Commissioner Stevens. We will now give Commissioner Henderson like 3 minutes to do an informal presentation. After he concludes his informal presentation, we will assign from a 5-point scale, as 5 points being the most points, the highest points you can achieve, to 1 as being the least points. We will assign points from the 3 voters here, and then Abraham, you can pick up the votes and tally the votes, and we'll see who's going to be appointed to this GPAC.
To the GPAC, very well. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, Commissioner Henderson.
May I use the podium to speak?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'd like to talk a little bit about why I'm interested in being on the General Plan Committee. First, I'd like to just talk a little bit about who I am. I moved here to the Hollister area in 2009, and I lived in San Jose for 10 years before that. And I moved to this general area from Southern California after graduating from college with a degree in electrical engineering. When we first moved to this area, we were living out in the country in a place called Libby Ranch. We were attracted to this area because of the schools weren't working out for my boys in the San Jose area, and we were just looking for somewhere else to go that would be a better fit for our boys and the family. I have 4 boys, ages 14 through 22 now. So we ended up living out in a place called Libby Ranch, and lived out there for about 5 years. And so I commuted all the way out there to San Jose for that time. And then later, an opportunity to purchase a home in downtown area came up, and so we took that opportunity. And we've really liked living in the downtown area, and I really enjoy being around the businesses. And so I feel strongly about the downtown area and making it better. Like I said, my background is in engineering. I'm used to taking on complex tasks, learning about things that I may not have dealt with before. But as an engineer, you analyze, gather facts, and learn about things that you may not have dealt with before, and you process them and make informed decisions. I think a lot of the talk about the general plan has been politicized in social media. About the growth has become kind of a controversial topic. I don't think personal feelings about growth are as important as what data shows. I think when we're considering how this community wants to grow, we should do it based on data. We should be looking at other communities that have grown in a good way and see what they've done, and use that information as far as making decisions. This isn't, this is a complicated thing, trying to plan and grow a community in the right way. I represent the type of person that, is a tech worker and commutes to San Jose. I'd really like to not have to commute to San Jose. I'd really like to see this community grow in such a way that tech companies want to come here, and then people can live in this community and work in this community, and not be such a bedroom community. So that's what I would really like to see happen to our to the Hollister, and so I would very much like to be considered to help that process move forward. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner Henderson. Okay, so we've both heard the formal presentations, and now we'll do our tallies. And before we get the results, I want to commend both Commissioner Henderson and Commissioner Stevens for stepping up to the call of civic duty, and I'm sure each of you would do a great job. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Also, while they're telling the votes up, maybe I'll ask Brian to go over the importance. We understand that we have an opportunity to speak to the general plan and shape this community into something that we all feel that benefits everybody involved. But can you also speak to why the state maybe requires and the benefits of actually having a finished general plan and what that allows from the state level?
So the state of California is constantly changing in terms of regulations with housing, community development, economic development, and it is beneficial to communities to constantly revisit the general plan as much as possible to kind of change how we look at ourselves from a community's perspective. As a GPAC, you are here to listen. You're here to listen from the public, to meet with the public at these public meetings, to take in their input, and to make sure that everyone is heard and that their opinions and takes on growth, whether it be industrial, commercial, residential, is looked at in the update of the general plan. General plans are meant to serve the community as a guide to properly plan our community. It isn't meant to stop growth in any way. Smart growth in particular, is about as smart as it can be in California. To subdivide a property takes years, many studies, to even get to the point where it comes to the Plan Commission. And so a general plan will tell us how to grow, where we should grow. And so, it's actually an essential guidebook to our community as to what we want to be at, what we want to look at in the future. So,
thank you.
Okay. Do we have the results?
We do, Chairperson Hivoy, and also just want to add, as staff, implementers of the general plan, and all of us here as staff are also residents of the City of Hollister, and we truly appreciate your interest in serving this commission and also your interest in the general plan advisory. And I think the words that were said today by every member are truly in the right path of where we want to be, and we truly appreciate all of your interest, and it's great to see that you're here for that right purpose. So thank you for that.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I would just like to say that I would have loved to have been on this committee, but I've got 4 very young children, and so this is my time. And as I said, whoever is chosen, whoever is going to be on it, I'm hoping for the best, and I'm hoping that whoever does it does a good job, because I'm putting down roots into this community, which is why I would have loved to have been on it, because I want to see this community grow, because I'm putting roots down. I don't want to leave, and I want this community to grow and be a good place for my family, my friends' families, and for the community in general. But either person, I mean, I hope, whoever it is, thank you for stepping up when, others like me and Seth, we both, have family commitments. And so, as I said, I would have loved to have done it. I'm sure Seth would have loved to have done it, but we have other commitments. But thank you for doing what we can. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. And so it's very impressive. It was so close that I had Eva also just confirm the points. It was just off by 1 point. And the one that got the most points by 1 point is Commissioner Stevens. So, yes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your confidence, and I'm gonna do my really best to represent this group well, and I'm going to lean on Commissioner Hubo for his experience as part of this group, because he has a lot of experience, and I know I'm going to need it. So thank you all.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to working with you on this prestigious committee. And thank you both again. Okay.
Can I just say one thing though? In terms of the sign committee, then we still have Commissioner Henderson and Johnson on the sign, right? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So we go to Planning Department reports.
Thank you, and I'll give it to Socorro to begin.
And we don't have any actual handouts. It's just what's on the, okay.
Good evening. The purpose of this presentation is for informational purposes. Sorry. So the purpose of this presentation is for informational purposes to updates that we are proposing to the municipal code. Then we'll bring it back for approval consideration, as Eva did. The changes that we're going to be, or the updates that we're going to be doing is going to be under Chapter 16 for subdivisions and Chapter 17 under stormwater management. The purpose of these updates is to provide clarity and consistency for a better understanding. And as a note, if for some reason there are some discrepancies between the code and the Subdivision Map Act, the Subdivision Map Act will always triumph our local ordinance. So, yeah, go ahead.
Provide some clarity to what she just said. Our existing code has a line in it at the very beginning that if there's any discrepancy between the Subdivision Map Act, the state's regulations, and the municipal code, the Subdivision Map Act, that's what they're.
City Engineer, can you please, for CMAP, and can you please talk to the microphone, please? Just so the members of the audience and
Sorry
the public
about
can
that.
also- Thank you.
Can you hear us now?
Thank you.
Yes, the existing municipal code has that language in it. What we're providing here tonight are just some brief clarifications so that when we are interfacing with developers or people that have questions and they don't see the exact language that is in the Subdivision Map Act versus what's in the municipal code. It's just providing clarification. So there's some minor subtle changes that are in here tonight.
Thank you, Danny.
And there you go.
So some of the proposed changes are specifically section 16.17, conversion of multi-family rental units, chapter 16.32, maps generally, 1636 for tentative maps, 16.40 for final maps, and 16.44 for parcel maps, minor subdivisions, and miscellaneous land division. So starting with Chapter 16.17, conversion of multifamily rental units, we are adding or proposing to add this definition for market rate multifamily rental, which means a multifamily rental unit with no deed restriction or rental agreement that restricts the rental rates in order to provide affordable housing to very low, median, or moderate income households. The second portion is 16.1730, which is residential conversion allowance. This is what it's existing. I know it's a lot. I'm not going to read it. But just the only change is to include the new definition here for market rate. And then the next portion is the inclusionary housing requirements for conversion of multifamily rental housing. So the existing, again, I'm not going to read it, but some of the basic changes for this is, find it. We are only including this section for inclusionary housing for less than or one or less bedroom units for low income and moderate income houses. So these two red sections are for those that weren't in there before. Then the second portion is inclusionary housing units. This is similar, but it's for rental instead of purchasing, which was the previous one. And again, we're adding a segment for rental units with with one or less than one bedroom. For maps, the section that we're adding or we're changing, it's a small one for tentative and final maps, where currently the tentative map requirements for subdivision and community apartment projects with 5 or more parcels or condominiums. It would include the conversion of dwelling to a stock cooperative with 5 or more dwelling units. So that would be the addition. And then another section would be to add section D and E, where D would be specifications under the exceptions for gross area of 40 acres or a minimum of a quarter of the section. And then
keep going.
And then section E would be for the creation of environmental subdivision. And then section F would be to specify that all the A through E above are required for parcel maps.
And commissioners, if I can again just remind you, we're going over a lot of stuff really fast, but all we're really doing with the municipal code is making it consistent with the subdivision map act. We're taking the actual language from the subdivision map act that was minus in the municipal code and just transferring it over. That way, when people pick up the code, they're seeing the subdivision map act and we're not going back.
We currently do not have an inclusionary zoning provision in our municipal code. So are we including then inclusionary zoning?
No.
At all? We're not including an inclusionary zoning proposal then?
No, that is not being discussed with the with the presentation that Socorro is making. That will have to be discussed at the council level, and then direct staff to work through the plan commission on the creation of that ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Just wanted to
Which there is talk at the council level of having an inclusionary zoning ordinance. So that's probably in our future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So next is tentative maps. This section talks about actions taken upon filing a tentative map. The update that we would do is it's to the distribution of copies of the tentative map filing. submission to the state highway facility if encroachment permit is required for this entity. So that would be the only addition that we would do to this. For final maps, existing is a 12-month time limit for recording a final map. We're changing that to 24 months.
Okay.
Then section 164020 from form a final map. Some of this was, it's just updating the type of paper where the final map will be printed on. Now we're requiring Mylar, so that's the change that we're making there. And then we're adding a little detail to include specifics for quick reference, such as the number of lots, the number of lettered lots, and gross subdivision boundary square feet of acreage on the corner, well, as it says there, on the up right-hand corner of the title sheet. So it would be for more of a quick reference of what we have. Setbacks for the data required on section 164030. We're removing setbacks since they are not really conventional for the subdivision map. Yeah, go ahead.
For final maps, lines and things such as setbacks or other things that aren't really pertinent to the boundaries and other things. The Subdivision Map Act allows for those things to be included in the maps, but they need to be placed on a separate sheet and clearly labeled as informational purposes only because they don't affect the boundary. So that's what this whole edit is about. This is the existing, and can you show them what the proposed would be?
So we would just be removing the setback portion. And if you see right-of-way widths and easement widths may be shown. And whereas before it would say right-of-way widths, easement widths, and setbacks may be shown.
And it's also removing that portion of the old metric code. Years ago, California tried to switch to the metric code, and then they went back to, and that language stayed in the municipal code, so they're striking everything referencing the metric code.
Okay.
Sorry.
Next section is parcel maps, minor subdivisions, and miscellaneous land divisions. This was the action by the subdivider after tentative map approval. We're changing that instead of having the parcel map be prepared, we're saying it will be recorded and then per government code. And then instead of having the Planning Commission grant an extension within 1 year, it will need to be 60 days prior to the expiration of the tentative map. Then for parcel maps existing, we're just including the section more specific as to the registered civil engineer or licensed land surveyor. It would be pre-1982. Then we're moving over to the stormwater management sections, and these are sections 17, 16, 140 for stormwater management, and it's A, B, and C, which would be drainage, grading permit, and stormwater quality. So stormwater management, we would be including, we would be including the words new development and redevelopment, whereas before that wasn't included. And instead of only listing the requirements of the definitions for stormwater runoff on property, which is what this blue portion said, we're including or we're directing them to the state MS4 general permit requirements.
And again, if I can just provide just a little more clarification for that. That is for a post-construction requirement. Previous to the city being under the post-construction general permit, the city would have runoff requirements that where you would take your pre-existing drainage, the difference between the post drainage and pre-existing, and use that for your formulation. The state had come up with a MS4 permit for post-construction requirements, and what we're doing is incorporating that into that portion of the zoning code that says this is what the requirement is, this is what you have to meet. And it refers back to the State of California Regional Water Quality Control Board's resolution that adopted that policy.
Then this next section, now we have 4 items under item A for drainage. We're adding 2 additional ones. The first, and so with that, it's going to renumber these items. The first item is for new and redevelopment post-construction drainage improvements shall be in accordance with the State Water Quality Control Board for the Central Coast region. And then we're adding item 4 with its construction for underground stormwater infiltration basins for new and redeveloped projects instead of having open retention or detention ponds. And then we're updating a small portion for 5 for instead of pre-drainage standards or meeting the pre-drainage standards, we would be using post-construction drainage standards. For the grading permit, we are more specific on the requirements by, we're saying we're involving any activities involving land disturbance, soils, storage, clearing, and grading, operations, construction, and installation of improvements in new development and redevelopment projects, as well as any and all activities which alter the volume, rate, or direction of stormwater runoff. So it's a little more specific than what we had before, which was just alter volume, rate, direction of stormwater, and then paving or addition. So for that one, we're making it more specific. Stormwater quality, section C. This is compliance with best management practices. That's existing. The big change here is that we're adding stormwater best management practices, and we're also referring to the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, as well as instead of having the city manager prescribing any requirements or additional requirements, it would be the city engineer.
I think that city manager was a typo.
So this is some of the updates that will be coming during the next meeting, something to look forward to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions on these updates? Okay. Well, I
don't have
appreciate that.
can I just, not a question about the updates, but just a question about how we're going to be addressing this at a future meeting. So is the expectation that we will familiarize ourselves better with this material and then make some kind of decision at some point, or is this just an FYI for
it's not an FYI. It's a preview of things to come. When we come back to the Planning Commission next month, we'll bring it in the form of a draft ordinance and present it as such and walk you through every single step and explain everything out.
Okay, thank you.
We like to call it the appetizer before the big meal next month. No, but Socorro did a great job. And the one thing that I'd like the commission to know is that on slide 65, we're getting away from basins and going towards underground storage of water, and that's a really great use of land. So we could use instead of just a big hole in the ground, hopefully we can use the surface of that for something. So it's a change that we're excited about. It's also something that came to Council Member Richmond at the dais, and they also wanted to see the change too. So that was just something I really kind of wanted to point out to the commission tonight. So
is that triggered on as a minor subdivision is required to do it as well, or just major subdivision as far as the catch basin?
Detention basins all projects have to address it in some fashion or another. Depending on the size, how much water you have to capture, it would determine the size of the basin. Okay. So everybody has to deal with flood control, and they have to deal with post-construction requirements. So if it's a small project, you might be able to get away with
landscaping,
okay. Grassy swales or something. Full-blown subdivision, you might have to put in
okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just point it out, and we'll bring back in your packet next month. You'll have all this information in there as well. So I just wanted to just point it out. It's a progressive way to make more land usable land. So.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion about that in the past, but I'm sure we'll be able to go over it in more detail when it comes before us in the draft for the future. Anything else on these updates? Does that conclude the planning department reports?
No, I actually have another section to go over.
And then I also have one.
Oh.
Hey,
Good.
Just remember, everyone signed up for this.
I'll tell you, I'm happy to hear that, Christian.
I'm eager
Go
to
ahead.
hear it.
You may proceed.
Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christian Bueles. I'm with the engineering department, and I used to be one of the planners, so it's been a long time since I presented to you, to the chairperson and also the commissioners as well.
But yet still a familiar face.
Good to see you again, Christian.
So one of the things that I wanted to do before I go over the changes and the amendment that we're going to do to Chapter 16.55, which essentially is just the park dedication, park construction, which is a requirement for every subdivider, in this case, any developer that comes in that wants to do either a minor subdivision or a major subdivision. There is requirements that require them to provide and dedicate land for parks, and also requires them to do improvements to the park. And the main reason why we're making these changes is so that we're going to make it clear, and this was a direction from the council as well, so that we don't have any issues with developers asking, is this correct? How are you supposed to do the dedication? How many fees are you supposed to be collected? Because in some of these areas, as I go through this chapter, there are some areas that are just silent and they just don't specify it, and we don't want to be in the guessing what we're supposed to be collecting. So the first section is section 16.55.1010, which is the purpose. The change that we're making is just pretty much updating because it refers to the Parks Facility Master Plan, which was adopted in 2002. We're actually moving forward to adopt a new Parks Facility Master Plan next month. So that will be the main change, which will be using the Parks Facility Master Plan once it gets updated next month, and also adding some language that specifies that the subdivider shall be required to dedicate land, but also provide improvements to the land. It's something that was silent before. It was only seen in some of the sections of this chapter. So we want to make sure that it is throughout the whole entire section, so that there is no guessing as far as what we're supposed to be doing. The next section.
Is there a place where the recreational improvements is defined? Like what exactly falls under recreational improvements? Is there somewhere?
Yeah, so there's a section, recreational improvements mean any type of amenity such as parks, tot lots, certain areas or objects that are required to be a part of park dedication and park construction.
Is that defined somewhere specifically?
It is defined in a different section, and it's also defined under the zoning code as well.
Okay.
I think what we'll do, once the Parks Master Plan is adopted with the Brigantino Park, we'll give everyone hard copies to have. So it's a nice plan, but we'll have those for you.
And I'm just thinking because automatically you think of parks, but there's just so many other ways, right, that you can use land that where you don't need just a walking trail.
Yep.
You know, that's some kind of recreation, but it's not like a park. So
Right.
I just wanted to see how it's defined in the code. So thank you.
Thank you.
And it's also something that has to go before the Parks and Rec Commission, so that when the subdivider decides to propose a project to the city and they're proposing a linear park or some type of trail, is something that has to go before them for approval. So that way we know exactly what we're getting. This next section is the general standards. The only thing that is going to change, everything else is going to remain the same, is the size. Currently, we have 4 acres for every 1,000 people. Once we do the update of the Parks Facility Master Plan, it's going to increase to 5 acres for every 1,000. And that's depending on the approval next month. It might be different. We're anticipated to be 5 acres for every 1,000. It might be more, but that's something that we will make a change if we have to. This next section, standards for park facilities within a subdivision, is a brand new section that we're adding to the code. We want to make sure that when the city gets the dedication from the development, that is something that is usable. It's something that the city could actually use to put a park. In some cases, there's a definition here that it says that it has to be, and you guys may read throughout as well, the purpose shall be suitable in location, topography, environmental characteristics, development potential for related to the intended use. So we want to make sure that we're not just getting something as far as a hill, and they say, well, that's your land dedication. So there is certain criteria here that requires them to position the dedicated land in a specific place that is beneficial for the city. There's also a section that talks about what's not eligible for park dedication as far as private open space. So we understand that the private open space is people's backyards. So we want to make sure that developments don't come in indicating, well, your dedication of land is private open space. So we want to make sure that that's clear. Same thing with the, sometimes developments will use, they will dedicate land that is being used for other requirements, such as the storm drain systems that are required by the city. So we want to make sure that those are not going to be used together, so that we have a better use of the dedicated land. This next section, requirements, as I said before, there is a section that it only specified land dedication, and it didn't specify the recreational improvements. So Section B essentially reads the same as Section A, with the difference that says every residential subdivider, as a condition of filing a final subdivision map or parcel map, shall provide recreational improvements, pay a fee in lieu of recreational improvements, or a combination of both. So that's an option that the developer has. So if for some reason they don't have the land to be dedicated, they have to pay the fee, or they could use both of them. And that's something that has been in place before, that we will continue to do. The next change is the formula for dedication of land. There's a formula that uses the 5 acres for every 1,000, and it also uses the census. So essentially, that's going to be updated as the Parks Facility Master Plan gets updated to 5 acres for every 1,000. And So the change will be that for single family, we use the formula of 3.52 persons per unit times the 5 acres. So that's how we come up with the formula. And for the multifamily will be essentially the same thing, using the 5 acres for every 1,000. But instead of using the 3.52 persons per unit, we use the 3.45 persons per unit, which is based on the census as well. This next section, in a specific, we wanted to make sure that even though this requirement is based on the land dedication and land construction, that the developer was also going to meet the requirements under the zoning code, which requires for multifamily to provide common open areas and also amenities. So we want to make sure that those are also part of the requirements. So those changes will be made. Another change that will be made to this section will be the collection of fees. So in the past, we had issues where the developer will dedicate the land and they will also provide recreational improvements, but they will go above the credits that they will have to pay, and the city will then enter into a reimbursement agreement. And we're trying to get away from that. So this chapter is going to read essentially specifying that the developers should stay within the credits that they have to pay, but if for some reason it goes above and beyond the credits that are to be paid, that is not the responsibility of the city to reimburse them for that. I don't know if that makes sense. I could clarify it if you guys...
Yeah, the city should never have to reimburse a developer for building a park. So, yeah.
And this section is essentially what I just mentioned, which will be the city will not be doing any type of reimbursement if the project goes above and beyond the credits to be collected. And the last section, which is procedures, this one is essentially staying the same. The only change is that we're adding the section that talks about the recreational improvements. As I mentioned before, throughout the chapter, there's only a couple sections that refer to the collection of recreational improvements or having the developer provide the recreational improvements. So that's the only change that is going to be made to this section. And I believe that completes chapter 16.55. Are there any questions that I
do have a question. The impact or the fees in lieu of fees, or so if they either are going to pay a fee or they're going to dedicate land, is there an amount?
Yes, so the amount is based on the Queen Bee Act, and the Queen Bee Act sets a dollar amount. So, for instance, if you have 10 units and the amount is $2,000 per unit, you will pay that amount. So that's how we base the fee. And also for the park construction or the recreational improvements is based off the impact fee. So we currently have a park construction impact fee, and that's how we will base the fee. So when the developer comes in and he's proposing 100 units, and let's say that the cost for the improvements will be based on that fee, and let's say it totals $500,000, that's how much he will have to dedicate to construct the park. And the section that we were referring to, no reimbursement, is that in some cases they do go above and beyond, and they do try to go before the city for reimbursement, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay, thank you.
We are in the process of updating our impact fees for parks. So right now the park impact fee is rather low, and so we're looking forward to the increase of that impact fee to more to pretty much help the city out if a developer does have to pay that rather than build a park. So. Thank you, Christian.
Okay, I'm back. And we have, in addition to the zoning amendments that we presented earlier, staff has been looking at different sections of the zoning code to make some amendments. So that's what I was going to go over tonight. And I would encourage you guys to ask me questions because this is something that I haven't drafted the actual section changes yet. So I want your input so that when I draft them and come with a real resolution for recommendation, you guys have had input and consideration in the amendments that we're talking about as staff. So the first thing that I want to talk to you tonight about is the open space requirements. Currently, and you'll see this table a couple of times, this is not the complete table 17042, but it goes over by residential district the amount of usable open space. And this kind of plays off what Christian was just talking about versus private open space and our multifamily open space requirements, and then versus the Chapter 16 dedication requirements. So right now this table is a little bit unclear, but it talks about 1,000 square feet of area for RE and R1 districts, and the R2 is 20% of lot area. And then as we get into the higher zoning districts, it goes over, it just states 500 square feet of usable open space per unit. And what we would like to do is clarify those requirements. In addition, this is also our current requirements. The multifamily residential general development standards section, which goes over specifically additional requirements for multifamily development, states that each unit has to have both private open space as well as the multifamily development itself needs to have common open space. So it talks about 64 square feet or 100 square feet of private open space per unit. And the common open space requirement is that of the required open space, which is assumed to be from that earlier table, the 500 per unit, 400 square feet of it has to be contiguous at ground level. And then it requires a minor amenity for small developments of 25 units or less and a major amenity for larger developments. So the proposed changes that we'd like to talk about, as Christian mentioned, he talked about the council initiating this conversation of requiring both the dedication Title 16 requirements and construction requirements, as well as the zoning requirements for private versus common open space. And so the City Council directed us to require both zoning open space and Quimby open space. So we'd like to split this up into by district. So just the low density are RE residential estates and R1 low density. We'd keep it the same at 1,000 square feet of private open space, as well as clarifying that they need to meet the requirements of Chapter 16 in addition. So each unit would have 1,000 square foot backyard at minimum, and they would also dedicate open space as required by Chapter 16. In the R2 zoning district, it'd be similar. They'd keep that 20% of lot area, but I'd like to clarify that it says 10% for each unit because it's a duplex-only zoning district. And then they would also have to meet the Quimby requirements. And then as we get into the higher density zoning districts, we'd like to split the requirements of open space into requirements per housing type rather than just strictly per district, and just make it clear that all development, again, is subject to the requirements of Chapter 16. So in the R3 and higher density zoning districts, we'd require that single-family detached units have that 500 square feet of open space as private, so in a rear yard at ground level. They're single-family detached, they're expected to have slightly larger lots, and so they would be required to have it private at ground level and meet the Quimby requirements. For single-family attached units or duets, we do 500 square feet private open space only, but it could be at ground level or on balconies. It's a little bit higher density townhomes, so they may have, a 200 square foot balcony on an upper floor and a small yard on the ground floor. But we would require it just to be private open space, and any common open space would be provided by the Quimby, the park dedication. And then as we get into multifamily development, so duplexes, apartments, we would keep the similar minimum private open space, 100 square feet at ground level or 64 square feet as a balcony, but then the remainder of the open space would be required to be common. So if, for example, you had a small yard duplex and they each had a 250 square foot private yard, there would be 250 left over per each unit, so total 500 square feet required of common open space. It could be met by providing just the 500 square feet in the private yard for each. However, we would still have the minor amenity requirement, so they could have large yards, but they would still need a minor amenity for them, a little barbecue area that's accessible or what have you for the two units. So we would want to make sure then that the common open space is accessible to all of the units and that it is privately maintained. And we'd like to write in a kind of a caveat on the privately maintained that if in the development there's multifamily mixed throughout, for example, we have some small lot developments that are mostly single family detached but have some duplexes mixed in, so there's a multifamily component, we as the city would consider that the common open space could be provided as additional space on the Chapter 16 requirements. Like if they were dedicating and constructing a park, we'd add any additional common open space if they had small yards to that park and allow it to be dedicated to the city rather than privately maintained, just because of the way the development is and the multifamily is dispersed. Otherwise, the common open space, the intent of it is to be a pool in an apartment complex, or like a barbecue area, picnic area that's private for an apartment complex. That's the intent of the common open space. But in developments like that, where there's mixed in multifamily, it might make more sense to have it dedicated as part of a larger dedication. And then the minor and major amenity requirements would remain the same. So even if they did dedicate to the city, they would still have to provide a minor amenity. It would just become public. So like a tot lot in a park with additional space. And then, as Christian mentioned in his presentation, the city would not be responsible if that requirement put them over the impact fee. But they would have to provide the amenity, but because of the situation of their development, it would become a public amenity, but it's meeting the zoning requirements. It's not for park dedication and construction. So that's the open space. Is there any questions on that before I move on?
Any questions?
Okay. Another thing that was noticed was cottage foods, home occupations for cottage foods. The California cottage foods law allows for preparation and or packaging of certain foods in a private home kitchen. and it restricts the levels of regulation that you can have on those operations. Our current home occupation section has a subsection about home occupations which require a conditional use permit. That includes the use of an accessory structure, as well as food handling, processing, packaging, catering, etc., where the operation is located in a detached accessory structure with a commercial kitchen. When we were noticing the zoning amendments, we were still a little bit on the kind of edge of whether or not cottage foods were kind of falling into this conditional use permit category, and if we needed to change the zoning ordinance to make sure that it didn't. But on kind of further review, it seems like cottage foods inside your main house in your kitchen that's not a commercial kitchen doesn't really fall into this category of requiring a conditional use permit. So we're going to keep looking into it to make sure that we don't need to change anything in the zoning ordinance. But right now, our interpretation of the code is that we can process cottage foods over the counter as our code is. So there probably won't be changes to this section.
Can you tell us what do they mean by cottage foods, or what exactly does that mean?
So it's a law that the state, because like the health department and things regulate the production of food and the packaging and food handling and things like that. But what cottage foods does is allow you to do that at home for certain types of foods. Like you could have a home business where you prepare jams or jellies and sell them to the public under the cottage foods law, which as opposed to having to have some kind of commercial kitchen to do kind of just like small. Yeah, so it allows for certain types of things. Things like brewery, like home brewing, is not something that's under the cottage foods. So it goes over specifically what kinds of things you can do. One thing you can do under it is like roasting coffee beans, but you can't serve coffee. Like you can't make coffee, but you can like roast and package coffee beans under the cottage foods law at home. So it allows, it's a little bit of leniency on some certain types of food production. Another thing, and this actually came up at our last planning commission, is staff would like to potentially have a discussion with the planning commission about industrial zoning district design standards and having potentially like a higher level of design requirements for like the materials of the buildings. And one of the reasons for this is the two business parks that we have in town. We have the Air Park Business Center as well as the Business Park off Technology Parkway. And those with their CC&Rs require those kind of higher standards of design. And those aren't necessarily in special districts. The Air Park is half industrial business park and half airport support zoning district. And then the Technology Parkway Business Park is entirely just in our M1. It's just our regular light industrial zoning district. So to kind of elevate the types of buildings that we're getting and, you know, really make things look good and look attractive from the street and have nice commercial and industrial buildings, the staff would like to talk about if we want to modify our zoning district design standards for industrial. And it's not on the agenda, but potentially other districts as well, like the West Gateway, and having a little bit more strict design standards in our zoning code, which don't currently exist in really any of our districts.
I have a question. Do CC&Rs trump the municipal code or vice versa?
They don't trump the municipal code. So both of the CC&Rs that we have for the industrial zones in the two different parks, the level of requirement that's for just the private owners, they say you can't build here unless you meet what I like. It meets our code. it meets and exceeds our code requirements. So the CCNRs, they don't necessarily trump it. Like if a CCNR had something for some reason that didn't comply with the code, I would think, and I could be wrong, but I would think that the zoning code would trump it. Like you have to comply with the zoning code, but in both of these parks, complying with the CCNRs, at least on a design level, meets and exceeds the minimum requirements of our industrial zoning district. Another one, and this one's complicated, so bear with me, is this is that same table, 1704-2. It's a couple of different columns on it. Goes over the density as well as the lot area per dwelling unit, the minimum. And this column, when I was doing my research on the open space and everything, this column doesn't make a lot of sense. And I have an example calculation. If you look here at the R4 high density zoning district, the density is 12 to 35 units per acre, and this lot area per dwelling unit minimum is 2,900 square feet. But if you do a calculation of what 12 units per acre, if you built a development at 12 units per acre, and say it was just, individual houses just kind of like spread out, but it was all on one lot because it's high density. The minimum square footage per unit at 12 units per acre is 3,630 square feet. So essentially, that's like the maximum lot size you can have in the R4 zoning district. For one unit on 3,630 square feet is 12 units per acre. And then to do the highest density allowed in the R4, it would be at 35 units per acre, and that puts you at 1,245 square feet per unit. So again, if you put one house on a 1,245 square foot lot, that's a density of 35 units per acre. So essentially that's the minimum lot size per unit. The way this column reads, it puts it at 2,900 square feet. And so you could never get to the higher levels of the density at this restricted square footage. So that if you put one house on a 2,900 square foot lot, it would be about 15 units per acre, the density. So something I'd like to do, and I have to just go through it all, make sure that it matches up with multifamily requirements and things like that, would be to potentially adjust this column to where it is more consistent. Another zoning change we'd like to make is the downtown mixed use and the neighborhood mixed use residential densities in our zoning code do not match the general plan. So this is a table LU2 from the general plan. The mixed use, which if you look at the general plan, all of the mixed use areas are zoned neighborhood mixed use, allows for 25 to 40 dwelling units per acre. And in the downtown mixed use, neighborhood mixed use, 25 to 40, downtown mixed use, 25 to 45. So what we'd like to do and bring back to you is to change our zoning density permits, which currently the downtown mixed use reads 25 to 40, and neighborhood mixed use reads 25 to 35. And we'd like to bring them into compliance with the general plan. The West Gateway currently is the same as the general plan. So I don't know if it was just a transferring error or, but that's something that we would like to bring forward to the commission for recommendation to the council at some point. This is a variation of design of the residences. So in our developments, the restriction we have states that the design of a unit may not be repeated more than once every fourth unit. But as far as what constitutes the variation and what's acceptable to be built, closer than that, like what makes the variation within those 4 units, it's not super clear. Like, is that just changing the floor plan? Is it changing the elevation, the orientation, etc.? So one of the cities that I've looked at in doing research is Morgan Hill, and they have a standard for their front yard setbacks, which they require at least 50% of the homes in a residential development to have front yard setbacks greater than the minimum requirement, so that it provides a street level variation in the depths of the homes. And I think that that'd be something that would be good to bring to our code, something similar to that, where we can have, instead of everything built out to the 18-foot minimum and kind of in line, we can have a variation of depth throughout any new developments. And then as far as the repetition of design, another element, this is my drawings here to kind of go over my concepts, but if the floor plan is, this is all the same floor plan 1, and this is floor plan 2, and then this would be like kind of a, ranch style and like a Spanish style and a modern style home. If you put a 1A on one lot, is putting just a 2A next to it enough variation? Or is putting a 1B next to it enough variation? And so we just want to make sure that we can kind of clarify what we feel comfortable with as enough variation and just make it super clear in the code. And I think including more visuals in the code as well will be helpful in explaining the concepts.
Eva, thank you for bringing this up. This is something we struggle with in the office. It's very unclear as to different variations. So
we struggled with it as commissioners in a past meeting where I don't think we had a clear idea to give to the applicant to make a decision on, okay, what are we looking for? So putting something like this together where it's kind of like, here's the guidelines to follow. This is it gives somebody a clear understanding, so that way they can do an elevation drawing one time rather than having to go back and pay changes and architectural fees and so thank you.
Yeah. And what you're going on kind of is a little bit beyond even this requirement. It would be more of like what constitutes the difference between A and B, but which is something that we review at like a master plan building submittal level. But this would be more of once all of them are approved and we've decided that A is different enough from B, is different enough from C, is putting the same floor plan all in a row enough variation? Or does it need to be the floor plan and the orientation, or the floor plan and the setback, or the floor plan and the orientation? Do we need to change multiple elements to be enough variation to be a neighbor? Or is it just one?
Well, going off of that past example that you used with Morgan Hill, did you reach out and ask them as far as what their variation of elevation design is?
I haven't talked to them. They do go through, they have quite detailed expectations on different things. I haven't read their entire code and I haven't talked to them, but I think that they have a good guideline, and they just kind of redid their entire zoning ordinance, I think like last year. And so it's really detailed. It's really new. They go into, the roof line height has to be different and things like that. So I think that they, among others, can be a good model for where we can get ideas on how to just make it clear. Because I think if we can make it clear, then I don't think people or developments or, the individual person are opposed to necessarily whatever's in the code. It's more of, if the code isn't clear, then they're opposed to when they provide something that in theory meets the code, but isn't necessarily our expectation or interpretation of the code, and we
Right.
request a change, that's where we get that pushback.
Right.
I think in terms of the, going back to the variation, you're going to get variation with the floor plans. The floor plans really dictate the variation. It's the embellishments of the floor plans is another thing, but that's secondary to the actual floor plan configuration.
Can I just state that I think, Hugo, you got some competition with the... Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Munster, for putting me in my place.
So the last section, that's something that we as staff have had some difficulties with in administrating, is residential fences and our requirements. I'm not going to read over this, but this is our table that dictates the heights of fences. So in the front yard, it can be 3 feet tall, or the code allows for it to be up to 4 feet tall, but you have to get approval by the engineer. And then the way that we do that is through a fence extension application to the planning department, which we transfer to the engineering department, and typically there's a site visit or two to go out and see if a fence can be taller in the front yard setback. And then within the side and rear yard, it's 6 feet tall with additional 2 feet of lattice. And then in the street side setback on the corner lot, which this is where most of our administrative struggles come from. So you know, the street side setback on a corner lot is 10 feet from the back of the sidewalk. So within that area, the fence maximum height is 3 feet. However, you can get an exception to allow up to 6 feet, because it is a side yard, inside of that 10-foot setback on the street side corner with approval from the city engineer through the same fence extension application process. We don't have an exact solution, and these are visuals pulled from Morgan Hill again. But what we'd like to do, or at least from planning, what we'd like to do is work with the engineering department to come up with clear restrictions with no exceptions for fence extensions. We can say it can be this tall in this area, and that's just it. Most cities don't allow for, it's this tall, but then sometimes it's this tall. It's a lot of, administrative back and forth, and then it's subjective once you go out there. And so another thing that we'd like to do to help facilitate this would be to come up with like a site distance triangle for intersections at corner lots. Morgan Hills is a 20-foot triangle that they draw, and within that triangle, nothing can be over 3 feet tall. No, theirs restricts structures, vehicles, landscaping. We'd like to work with the engineering department to establish that distance triangle. Sometimes ours may vary. It could be based off of the speed limits of the road, the length of the triangle leg. You can do it either way, but what we'd like to do is to kind of establish that triangle so that it's clear. We can say you're on a corner lot. This is the area where it can only be 3 feet tall. Other than that, you can step up in the side and things like that, and that's all done. If your fence meets the requirements, you can just build the fence. There's no permitting required. It's only when you get into the fence extensions that they need to come to us and get permits. So to make this clear and just say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, be free, that's what would be helpful for us. That's everything that I have for zoning, if there was any questions.
I have a question on the variation of design of residences for the setbacks from the street and how that one. Right now, is there, because I see the development on Buena Vista, those houses are an exact line. There is no variation versus my neighborhood where my house sits a little bit farther back than my neighbor's, and my neighbor's house is pretty even with mine, but then the next neighbor is even farther back. So is that something that's new, or is that just...
Yeah, so this is something I pulled straight from Morgan Hill. We don't have anything like this in our code. It's something that I'd be interested if the Planning Commission and the Council was interested in implementing something like this. We can make it our own if we need to, or we can copy them, and we can see if it works for them and talk to them. But it's something I'd like to implement, or at least use as a guideline for implementing something within the city.
My personal, I guess if I can give my personal opinion, is that I find that my neighborhood's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, because we do have this variation where I'm not walking out my front door and shaking my next door neighbor's hand. Whether we're right next to each other, their house front door is on the opposite side of their house. My other neighbor, she's on the complete opposite side of mine. And it makes it so that we don't feel like we're right on top of each other, especially because a lot of these homes are being built on top of each other. It might give the feeling of not being on top of each other, that you have a little bit more room, you have a little bit more breathing room. And it gives it a little bit, I personally feel a little bit more aesthetically pleasing versus in a cookie cutter row.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where we'd like to move and see the ordinance move, is to, have that alternate level of variation. And so that could be something, and we could have some kind of hierarchy, right? As Hugh mentioned, maybe the change in elevation design is of a lesser hierarchy than changing the floor plan. So maybe if you want to put a house next to it, you would need to if you change the floor plan, that's good enough. But if you're only changing, you want to put a 1A next to another 1, you want to put a 1A next to a 1C, it's the same floor plan, so you also need to push it back.
I'd like to offer another idea that in terms of design standards is infill design standards for historic districts. And since Commissioner Munster brought up your graphics there, I did illustrate that for the city of Santa Clara. I can drop off a copy for you.
We do have in the Old Town Medium and Old Town High design guidelines that go over, I believe there's 5 or 6 different historic design like Victorian, Mediterranean, that are permitted within the Old Town districts. But as far as the historic districts themselves, so that's actually more in the downtown mixed use, those are restricted by being on the National Register. And so you would have to be in conformance with the National Register of Historic Places guidelines for constructing new or remodeling anything that is historically significant.
It's just that it may be worth looking at in terms of a supplementary design guidelines other than the state historic guidelines.
Sure, yeah. And I think at least myself and Amber definitely are
interested
in design
neighborhood
guidelines.
Compatibility and massing scale, stuff of that nature. I wouldn't have brought it up if it wasn't for Commissioner Munster.
I like
you got me started on it.
I like the drawings.
I don't know what slide it was.
So,
Go ahead.
what do you need from the commissioners to, as far as us supporting the idea of putting those guidelines together?
I think for these guidelines, industrial zoning guidelines, or guidelines in general, I think for design guidelines, it might be good to set up an actual study session that we notice in addition to Planning Commission, and invite the public to come and have just a discussion about what we want to see in industrial, what we want to see in the West Gateway, the North Gateway, just because we don't have anything right now as far as design guidelines go in any of our districts. So it'd be good to have a discussion with the commission and with the public and with developers, and see what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, what do we want to see in these areas. But as far as the rest of the things that I presented on, if you guys had anything to add or anything else that you want me to look into while we're kind of preparing these zoning amendments, it's kind of a mass zoning amendment random change. So I just wanted to bring them to you guys and let you know what staff's been looking at, what we deal with administratively, and difficulties we're having, and things that we're going to try and change in the future.
I think you guys have done a very, very comprehensive job on this. Spent a lot of time on it, and we do get into some of that in terms more of a generalities, and the general plan. We don't really get into specifics in terms of the design guidelines, but in like land use policies, I mean, we do address it in the general plan update.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well, that perhaps the design guidelines is something that might wait until we start having general plan discussions.
Okay.
Well, I like the idea of having a public talk meeting, where we can all come together, because it's important. That's what we're here for, is to serve the public and not our own interests. So I may like something, but it may not be what the entire public wants. And I would love to hear what the public wants to see in their community, because they're the ones that live here too. And it's not just me, and it's not just everybody on the commission. So I think that would be a really good opportunity to engage them and bring them into the discussion so that they feel like they're part of these decisions, which they should be.
Agree, and I not to mention that they probably have a lot of great ideas like that we can't possibly come up with, and so along that question would be like, how soon could that happen? What are the steps that would take to make something like that happen, etc.
And just have a free discussion. What Amber was saying was, can we do an open house? And I think what we could do, I don't know exactly how soon. I think as far as the zoning amendments, I'll try and focus on the other ones. And then as far as having a discussion, we can coordinate with you guys and see when might be a good time, get a couple of dates, and then notice it. We would just have to notice it because we'd be getting you all together, but we try and do something informal, as if it was like an open house discussion.
Eva, could we have pizza that night?
You buying?
Yeah.
Okay.
You said that for the public record.
Hey, I like to support local business.
Right.
So
I expect round table.
Maybe I'll have some flown in from Chicago.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
If I may, really quickly, going back to the industrial zoning standards, just because there are quite a few industrial commercial projects that are in the pipeline, and this is something that we are currently struggling with, giving direction to those that aren't in CCNRs. Those that are, particularly, we have at least two that are in the airport business parkway, and those CCRs are very high in their standards. They have to have a stucco finish. Oftentimes they're required to have four-sided architecture, whereas the one off of Technology Parkway, we haven't been as fortunate to know what some of those CCNRs are, but we had a project last Planning Commission that was on the outside of that, of the Technology Parkway. So we're trying to make sure that these are blending in with the surrounding. And I just kind of wanted to give you guys an example of how general it is for the facade, if you will. So this is the code, the Hollister Municipal Code, referring to M1, and it says a new construction should include windows, articulated entries, trellises, or other features where building walls are visible from the streets. Ungalvanized materials, such as metal surfaces, shall not be used on any primary surfaces that are visible from a street, such as with a hotel, motel, or residential zoning district. Industrial facilities with a utilitarian design shall be screened with landscaping. So that is leaves lots of interpretation, which on one hand is good, and on the other, when you're trying to make sure they blend in with some of these places that are closer to the CCNRs, it makes it very difficult to we can, of course, recommend these changes to the applicant, but at a certain point, our hands are tied. One of the things that we have is the San Felipe, what is it called? It's kind of, there's standards for along the San Felipe within 300, on the North Gateway. Within 300 feet off of that roadway, there are certain things that if people are building off of there, they have to meet, and those have stricter standards than our M1 commercial areas do. So just to kind of give you an idea, and even with Chairman Huboy, when you brought up the general plan for West Gateway, for example, we have a ton of people that are so interested in developing there, and there's very general standards for design within our code, and the most specific we can get is with what is in the general plan, if that kind of gives you an idea of how broad and loose those standards are currently. So definitely staff is really excited and more than willing to hear what not only council and the commission have to say, but as well as the community. We really want to move forward. So often we hear things like it's not going to work here in Hollister, it just doesn't pencil out, and that's not good enough. So we definitely look forward to having those discussions.
And we did have a public workshop when it comes to the West Gateway, and it wasn't super specific, if you will, but we did come up with a design type of vernacular that we would expect in the West Gateway, and a lot of the way we came up with it, this is several years ago, but a lot of we came up with it, we got a lot of public input from people that lived out there.
Yeah, and we'd like to do that and then put it in the code.
Okay. Well, you guys have been busy. I can see that. Do we have any more planning department reports?
That is all.
Nice job.
Okay, very well done. I certainly appreciate that. Let's go into Planning Commission reports.
I have nothing to report on.
Anything to report? I did have, there is a special meeting from I had an agenda that was emailed to me by the city clerk this Sunday at 8 o'clock. We're going to have a kind of a 8 a.m. Do you want to just give an executive summary what that's about?
Yeah, I believe there will be a firm, I think it's called Let More Than Talk, or it's not just talk, and essentially it'll be that person will be talking to each council member about their position on the council and kind of just getting along. Everyone is at the dais, and the future of being a council member. So,
also, wasn't it that was a workshop goals?
I don't.
Council vision and goals.
It could be.
What I printed out here: a group facilitation to share the outcomes of one-on-one facilitation for each city council member and mayor, also to share goals and visions for the community from an individual platform. The end results a more cooperative and productive elected official while still maintaining their individual principles. I think that's kind of what you were saying.
That's a great description.
But it's open to the public.
It is.
That
yes.
might drop by before church on Sunday.
There you go.
I'll have to leave at 9:30 for my guitar duties at St. Luke's.
That's an important job, so you can't miss that.
It is very important for me, I'll tell you that.
Is there something more? Is there a formal announcement out on that? Because this is the first that I've heard of it, but it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, council members or commissioner members Stevens, if you go to the city's website, there is a formal agenda for Sunday that kind of outlines what the day will entail.
Yeah, I'll see if I can stop by. I encourage my other fellow commissioners to also stop by on Sunday at 8 o'clock.
That's right. Sounds really interesting.
After you had your cup of coffee, of course. Or tea.
If I may, Commissioner Stevens, and for the public who may still be listening, as Brian mentioned, the agendas are posted on our website, but if you'd like, the city clerk does keep an email list of people who are interested in receiving the agenda and agenda packet for the council meetings. And so if you email the city clerk, you can be added to that list so that you get notified every time there's a meeting or a special meeting. And we keep one for the Planning Commission as well.
Great. Thank you, Eva. Any other commissioners care to give a report? Well, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll second that.
We need a first motion, please.
I'm sorry. I make a motion to.
You want to make a motion?
Adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you for coming.
This is meaning to stop.